Since half of you are and half of you aren't, I'll go ahead and I was curious to see what would happen. When you found your place, if you go ahead and stand, I didn't know who would sit after the song or who would stay standing, and my ornery side decided I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to see what happens, and we'll go from there. Joshua chapter 3, starting in verse 14, it says, "And it came to pass, when the people removed from their tents to pass over Jordan, and the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people, and as they that bear the ark were come unto Jordan, the feet of the priests that bear the ark were dipped into the brim of the water, for Jordan overfloweth all his banks at the time of harvest, that the waters which came down from above stood and rose up upon an heap very far from the city Adam, that is beside Zerdan, and those that came down toward the sea of the plain, even the salt sea, failed and were cut off, and the people passed over right against Jericho. And the priests that bare the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the midst of Jordan, and all the Israelites passed over on dry ground until all the people were passed clean over Jordan." Let's go ahead and have a word of prayer. Lord, I want to thank you for the evening that we have, the time that we can take in your word tonight. I do pray that you will speak through me tonight, Lord, and just use this time. I pray this in your name. Amen. You can go ahead and be seated. I'm going to stray from our series tonight and preach a message that I believe God gave me and is, I think, fitting for our time. I guess I'll just put it that way. The idea that I want us to look at is found, we're going to look at this whole passage we read, but it's found out of verse 17, where it says, "The priests that bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the midst of Jordan." But that idea, they stood firm. The idea of standing firm, that's not an easy thing. I'm just going to start off that way this evening. It can be very difficult. We know as Christians, as children of God, that we shouldn't be wishy-washy. Ephesians 4:14 and 15 says that we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro, and carried about with every wind of doctrine by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive, but speaking the truth in love may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. We're familiar with verses like that, where it's telling us that we need to grow past the point of being tossed back and forth. You know, as a young Christian, we all are. That it's new, and there's a lot of things that we're learning and that we're growing, and that maybe we simply don't understand. But there should come a point in, as you grow as a Christian, that you grow up past that, to where you're strong in what you believe. You look at a child. There is an age for a child that it is understood. They're going to, I'm trying to think of an example. I'll just use the example that comes to mind. There is an age of a child where it is acceptable that they soil their pants. But there is a point that you expect they're going to grow past that. We'll just keep it real simple. It's understood as a baby Christian. There's going to be some of that you're trying to, you're trying to understand. You're trying to grow, and there's things that you don't understand. So it feels like being tossed to and fro. But there has to come a point that we grow past that, where we grow to where we are strong in what we believe. The problem is that can be really difficult when we have to stand in what we believe. We live in a time that it's not popular, it's not liked to be to stand strong in anything. If you're firm in what you think, or you're firm in what you believe, people aren't going to like that. It seems to be okay to stand firm in pretty much anything else, but the moment that you attempt to stand firm in the Bible, or in biblical truth, you're accused of, shoving religion down their throat. What everyone seems to want is a world filled with people who are just, I guess, yes men. That they don't want anyone who disagrees with them, and they certainly don't want anyone who is going to challenge them, and they just want a bunch of people who are going to bow to whatever they say. The problem is that really doesn't work. You can't have a world full of people that just say yes all the time, or nothing would ever get done. But that's the time we live in. We live in a time where no one, where it's not liked. We live in a time where no one wants to stand. No one wants to be strong in something. Because the reality of it is, if you stand firm on something, there's a very good possibility you're going to be standing alone. It's a very good possibility you're going to be standing alone. And again, people don't like it when you make a stand and want a world full of spineless people. So when you make a stand, you just set yourself apart. You became different from the majority, and you may be making that stand alone, and no one wants that. Whether we admit it or not, everyone to some point wants to be liked. I have in my notes wants to be popular, and I don't know that that's the right term, but we want to be liked. Everyone wants to be surrounded by friends and wants to be with people who think just like they do. So no one wants to have to stand strong in something. No one wants to have to stand firm in something. Even many people, even if they think something, probably won't tell you where they differ from you in. I don't know about you. I've had friends that are that way, that that I've known, they must have an opinion for themselves. I think everyone probably does, but I've had friends that the entire time we were friends never told me their opinion. They just went along with everything I did. Whatever I said I liked, they said they liked. And whatever I said I wanted to do, they said they wanted to do. And my hobbies became their hobbies and so forth. Because if they were to stand firm and, well, this is what I like, well, they might be alone. That's the time that we live in. We live in a time where no one wants to offend. Even if you do happen to have an opinion on something, everyone seems scared to give it, because giving your opinion is probably going to make someone mad at you. And it's the truth. People get upset, people get offended at what seems like the goofiest things. If you have an opinion and voice it, it really doesn't matter what your opinion is. If you have an opinion and voice it, someone will disagree with your opinion and will get upset, and their feelings are going to get hurt because you told your opinion. However, I don't think this is really a new thing. I mean, this has been going on for years. I read one time that in the early days of our country, when congressmen had a disagreement, they would go outside and duel over it. They'd go outside and shoot each other over a disagreement in Congress, which might change the way things are done in Congress. This article I read, though, said they claimed the only reason that as many of them lived as did was because the guns were so incredibly inaccurate, and you only had one shot, so you'd shoot your one shot, you'd both miss, you'd shake hands and go back inside and keep working again. But the idea of that you're going to offend someone if you have an opinion, this is no new thing. This has been going on for a while. It just kind of, I guess, gets painted as a bigger picture now. I think because of how many different avenues we can see things from, it gets painted as a bigger picture. But because of it, no one wants to make a stand because, well, it might offend someone. It might upset someone if I make a stand. I used to be in a Facebook group of I was going to say young pastors. I don't know that I still qualify. Maybe that's why I'm not in anymore. I don't know. I used to be in a Facebook group of young pastors, and I think it's funny because my dad always growing up talked about that there would be email groups of pastors that would send things. That apparently is no longer the thing. It's now they start Facebook groups and include all their buddies in it. And I was in one of those, and there was an argument over standards. And the problem was I have some. And I didn't mind telling them I have some. And I got kicked out of their little Facebook group of their buddies because apparently I was the only one that had a problem with the fact that they didn't have some, and I did. And because I took a stand, someone was offended. Josh and I were talking not long ago. I'm just not a normal preacher of my age. I just don't fit that normal mold, I guess, because I stand for the same old things I've always stood for. In fact, that was one of the statements by them is, well, you're one of those unwavering old path guys. Praise the Lord, yes. I'm okay with that. Like he meant it as an insult, and I kind of took that as yeah, that feels pretty good. Sure, yeah, call me that all day long. I'll take it. But whether popular or not, it's needful for us as Christians to take a stand. The passage that we read tonight, I want to focus in on one verse to start. I kind of already mentioned it. Joshua 3:17, the priests that bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the midst of Jordan, and all the Israelites passed over on dry ground until all the people passed clean over Jordan. The priests stood firm. Three things that I want us to see about that tonight. The first is they stood firm despite a changing world around them. You think about the situation that they're in. This is all new. Every bit of this is brand new territory for them. The people are moving. I'm not going to have us read it all again, but where we read 14 through 17, everyone around the priests are moving. A nation of people on the move, and God tells them, I want you to stand right here. They must have felt alone. I don't know exactly how many people it is here that are crossing. The Bible doesn't give us an exact, and you can read all sorts of scholars that give their guess at numbers, but that's all it is a guess at numbers. Anyway, you go, it's a nation of people. It's a lot. And the priests, while it is more than one priest, I understand that, but the priests, in comparison, is a very small group. Imagine how alone you would feel as you stand in the middle of the river knowing everyone else is passing you by. That's hard to do. It's hard when you feel like everyone else around you is moving in one direction and you have to be the fish that's swimming upstream. They're standing firm despite everyone else moving in a different direction. They are standing firm despite life as they know it changing. You think about the change that is happening in their life. This is the crossing over into the promised land. This is a big moment. I mean, this is a big thing. They have been wandering around the desert for the vast majority of their lives. Now they're finally allowed to enter the land that God has promised them. Life as they know it is changing big time. 40 years of one thing and now change. I mean, 40 years is a long time, and in that 40 years, they have known one thing. You get up, you wander around the desert, you occasionally stop to dig a grave. That's been their life. And while that is not a good life, it is what they know, what they've grown comfortable with. People don't like to be taken from what they have grown comfortable with, even if what they've grown comfortable with is a bad thing. Wandering the desert has been rough. I don't know how many messages that I have pointed this out. I can't imagine the mindset of wandering the desert for 40 years knowing I'm just wandering until those people die. I mean, that's tough. That is a hard way to live, but it's what they know. And now the life as they know it will never be the same. But life as they know it is changing, and I'm sure they also have a desire to go. You know, you think about this, everyone else is getting to go into the promised land before you. If these priests are anything like you and I would have to think they're watching everyone else and thinking, well, when's it my turn? I mean, come on, how many times have we seen someone else getting something and think, well, everyone else gets to do that. Why don't I? I mean, they're standing there, told to stand firm right here, watching the people go. You have to think the thought came to their mind, well, why can't I go? I mean, I've waited just as long as they have. I want to be in the promised land just as badly as they do. Why do they get to go and I have to stand firm? They were standing firm despite the world changing around them. Despite everyone else doing maybe what they wanted to, they stood firm. They didn't move. We live in a world in transition. That doesn't mean we are to transition with it. I don't think there's anyone that would deny our world is vastly changing. The advances in technology seem like they are vastly changing every day. I watched one thing on the news recently that predicted, who knows if they're right, but they predicted the next 5 years will be outnumbered by artificial intelligence. Whether or not it's true, I don't know, but the changes that they are making in those fields are advancing every day. Things that only a few years ago we thought would be impossible are now a reality. I mean, you think about it, it wasn't that many years ago that had someone told you that what your smartphone is capable of now, they would have locked you in a mental facility. I mean, probably 15 years ago, they would have thought you were a crazy person had you told them that you'd be carrying a computer in your hand that's smaller than your hand and can do more than the computers they had. I mean, technology, it changes fast. Our world is vastly changing. Things like transportation is changing fast. It used to take a wagon train 5 months to cross the United States. Now you can jump on a plane and be there in a few hours. I mean, we went from wagons to putting a man on the moon in less than 100 years. And now advancements with electric cars and self-driving cars, I mean, vastly changing. Political things are vastly changing. Don't take me wrong in this. I want to make sure I say this right, but I think a lot of the things that are happening in our country now are exactly what pushed the Pilgrims to leave the old world, because things are vastly changing. And that's not even mentioning politically what's going on in the rest of the world with Russia and others right now. Our world is changing fast. And because of that, many Christians seem to think that since the world is changing fast, we need to as well. That since the world is changing, well, we need to adapt to that. And since the world has changed, we have to change our music. Or since the world has changed or doesn't like the stuff that we sing, that we need to adapt to something that they like better. And they claim that we need to change maybe the message because it's too harsh for today. The people don't want to hear they're sinners. They never did. I mean, yes, you're right. People today don't want to hear that what they're doing is wrong. And the mindset is, well, since they don't want to hear that, we should tone it down. They never did like it too much. That's kind of why they put Jesus on the cross. Because they didn't like it. You look at the different men of the Bible who went and they preached the message that God gave them. It was pretty often that people didn't appreciate that they were told, hey, you're a wicked sinner. But that didn't change the message because people got offended. Some will claim that we need to change the methods, the way that we do things, because the way that we used to do things no longer works in our society, so we have to adjust to fit the new crowds rather than just trusting that God knew what he was doing. Here's the point. We as children of God need to stand firm despite a changing world. I'm pretty sure, and I say that with a lot of sarcasm, I'm pretty sure God knew what the world would be like in 2022 when he gave us our Great Commission. Where our world is right now is not taking God by surprise. The whole mess going on in Russia or the things going on in our country, it's not like God is sitting in heaven going, wow, didn't see that coming. No, he knew. When he told us what we were supposed to do, he knew exactly what today would be like. We don't need to change it. We just need to follow it. Stand firm despite a changing world. Number two, stand firm despite looming danger. I want you to think about the position that these priests are in for a moment here. They're in the middle of the water. They aren't told, stand on this side of the river until everyone passes over. They aren't even told, cross the river and stand on that side of the river until everyone passes over. No, they're told, walk out to the middle and stand firm. That has to be an intimidating place to be. Because they knew what happened to the Egyptians in the middle of that river. They understood the dangers that are here. Their obedience, their going out and standing in this river wasn't out of ignorance. They knew the possibilities. It isn't that they just didn't know any better, so they blindly followed. They knew. I guarantee they had heard from their parents the story of what happened when they crossed the Red Sea. When you see God do something like that, that isn't something you soon forget, and it's definitely something you're telling your kids about. You're going to tell the story of the day that you were trapped between the sea and the armies of Egypt, and God opened the waters so that you could cross over on dry ground, and then once you were over, the army followed you in, and God let the walls of water wipe them all out. You're going to tell that story as many times as you possibly can. I guarantee these people have heard. And you're walking out there praying that the priest next to you didn't do something to make God mad. Because the middle is a scary place to be. There's not the safety of the shore. I mean, on the shore, or even at least close to the shore, if the wall of water came down, you might make it out alive. Not in the middle. You can't run back. You can't run forward. It's too far. They are in a rough spot, and they are to stand firm with the walls of water waiting. Look at verse 15 and 16 with me. And as they that bear the ark were come unto Jordan, the feet of the priests that bear the ark were dipped in the brim of the water, for Jordan overfloweth all his banks at the time of the harvest. The waters which came down from above stood, listen to this, and rose up upon an heap, very far from the city Adam, that is, besides Zeratan, and those that came down toward the sea of the plain. Even the salt sea failed and were cut off, and the people passed over right against Jericho. Now, I don't know how long this crossing took. Again, Bible doesn't tell us. With a nation of people crossing, I can't imagine it was fast. This is going to take a while. But it doesn't take long of water being stopped before you have a lot of water backed up. The Bible calls it a heap. I think it was a pretty big heap pretty fast. It doesn't take very long of stopping water before it backs up. As a kid, my brother loved to build like these little towns. We lived in property, or on property, and there was streams running through it. So he'd build like these little towns, and he'd take sticks and carve them out. So he'd make these little cool little log cabin towns all along the river. He took a ton of time to do it because my brother's a perfectionist like that. And so he'd make, I mean, they really were these neat little towns by these little streams. And I was an obnoxious little brother. And so he liked building towns, and I liked building dams, which would then flood and destroy his town pretty much right after he finished them. I figured out how to time that pretty well, that if I built the dam downstream, it flooded his town right about the time he was done with it. But here's what I learned. It doesn't take very long before a little stream backs up to be a lot of water. Now, think about this river being stopped by God, the wall of water that would be formed. And the longer this crossing took, the larger that wall got. That's a scary place to be. I can imagine that, as you stand, starting off, the wall wouldn't be that big. I mean, it is a river that is overflowing its banks. It's never small. But, relatively speaking, the wall was smaller at the start. But the longer it takes, and the more people are passing, and the more and more water that backs up behind it, and suddenly you're standing there with a whole lot of water looming over you. It gets a little harder to keep standing strong. I mean, when danger is looming over us, we tend to get a little antsy. But they didn't run when danger loomed over them. They stood firm. We also are to stand firm despite looming danger. No, it isn't easy. But we need to stand firm despite opposition. It seems to be less and less true of me the older I get. I used to be one that hated confrontation, and I just was not a confrontational person. So when someone came up, I'd try to find a way to diffuse it or step back or whatever. And I think that's true of most people. That there are some who confrontation doesn't bother them, and some who I think thrive off of confrontation. But the majority of people just don't like it, and I understand that. But because we don't like it, means we often tend to just back off and not stand for things that we need to stand for. There are some things that, whether I like confrontation or not, whether you like confrontation or not, are worth standing for. Some examples. I believe my country is worth standing for. I've said it tonight. I don't agree with everything our country is doing. I'm not a fan of some of the directions some things seem to be going. I don't like some of the political decisions that have been made and the, I guess, arrogant attitude that our country has accepted. That being the case, it's still my country and it's worth standing for, whether I like confrontation or not. But more important, and it really is more important, I believe my Bible is worth standing for. I don't care what opposition comes. It really doesn't matter how unpopular what it says is. None of that matters. This book is worth standing firm for. Despite opposition, but also despite fear. I've kind of said this over and over throughout on purpose. Standing is a scary thing. Because when you take a stand, as I said, you don't know who's going to stand with you, if anyone. For all you know, you're going to be all alone. And I think that scares us more. I think it scares us more, the idea of standing alone, rather than not knowing who we're going to stand against. But that doesn't change the fact that we need to stand firm. We need to stand. Stand firm despite the world changing around you. Stand firm despite looming danger. And then lastly tonight, stand firm despite impending enemies. You look at verse 16 with me. The waters which came down from above stood and rose up upon a heap, very far from the city Adam, that is beside Zeratan, and those that came down toward the sea of the plain, even the salt sea, failed and were cut off. Now look at this last part. And the people passed over right against Jericho. Those words. They passed over right against Jericho. That means you cross over this river, immediate danger. The people of Jericho already knew them. They told that to them when the spies came, and you can't tell me that the people in Jericho, if you're crossing over right against Jericho, you can't tell me they didn't see a giant heap of water and a nation crossing. They knew what was coming. This is like I've said over and over, this is going to be a long process to get a nation across here. It's going to take time, and it's going to, because of that, wear people out as they're going across here. There is in that every possibility that they could cross over this river and the army of Jericho will be standing on the other side waiting for you. If that wasn't enough, they're crossing over into more than just Jericho and into enemy territory. You're not only talking about the immediate enemies, but you're talking from this point forward, they know that they're going to be facing enemies and opposition every step of the way. There's going to be no easy days from here on out. They know that once they make this stand, they have to stand from here on. Standing firm on what you believe. I haven't been able to think of a nice way to say this. Standing firm on what you believe will mean you'll have enemies. There's no denying it. If you make a stand, people will not be happy about it. If you make a stand and stick with it, not trying to sound negative here, but it does, there'll be no easy days. Because if you make a stand and stick with it, there's always going to be opposition. There'll always be enemies. But that doesn't change what we ought to do. It doesn't change what we ought to do. I find it amazing. You have these priests that they are told to walk out in the middle of the river, and you're going to stand firm while everyone else crosses. You're going to stand firm, and you're going to stand firm despite the heap of water and despite the possible enemies on the other side, and all of these things that are going on in their world and in their life. You notice you don't see any priests saying, I don't want to stand. You don't see any priests that are saying, I am unwilling because this is going to mean I'm going to have enemies on the other side, and you know what, I'm just not a confrontational person, so I'm not going to stand. No, what the Bible shows us is just they're told to do it, and so they go out and stand firm. Just stood and did what God said. Can I tell you, our changing world and potential enemies and dangers and all of those things doesn't change what we ought to do. We often will, because of different political things going on, and you'll hear people who will, well, we just need more, more Christians in politics, or we need a Christian in the White House, or we need, this reform or this thing. Can I tell you what we really need? We need Christians who will just stand. But the problem I shouldn't say the problem, one of the major problems in our country and in our world is we've had way too many Christians who are content just to sit. Because standing means confrontation. Standing means enemies. Standing means the possibility of problems. I don't want that, so I'm just going to step back. What our world needs is Christ. Where they're going to get that is from a Christian that's willing to say, no, this is what my Bible says. And it really doesn't matter what a changing world says. This is what God says, and I'm just going to stick with that. Let's pray. Lord, I want to pray that you will, Lord, help us to be just that. A Christian that is willing to just say, I'm going to stand firm. It doesn't matter what my world is doing. It doesn't matter who may be offended by it. It doesn't matter the dangers it may bring. I'm just going to stand firm on what God's told me. So the reality is that's what our world needs. Our world needs Christ. And it needs Christians who will stand and proclaim him. I pray that you help us to determine I'm going to be that kind of Christian. He's just going to stand on what's right. Pray this in your name. Amen. Let's all go ahead and stand with heads bowed and eyes closed tonight. We're going to prepare for an invitation song this evening. And for the altar call, I want to keep it